Transcendental Transformation, the place where spirituality and transformation unite. Host Miss Raina imparts truth so that you can break through your limiting beliefs and evolve into a deeper consciousness. As you go about your day, remember, before every breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And now, let's start the show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Transcendental Transformation. I'm your host, Miss Raina, and today is Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. As always, we are coming live from the Sirius Star System studios right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I hope all is well with everybody. So, guys, it has been a long week, and I have some exciting news because we are now on Spotify, and I'm so excited because we are reaching out all over. We also applied for Amazon Podcasts. I guess Amazon is now doing podcasts, and I think that's a great thing because the more platforms that we're on, the more we can do, the more we can reach, and I think it is a really wonderful thing. So yes, we are now on Spotify, and if you guys are a part of Spotify, make sure you find us and like us and do all sorts of wonderful stuff so you guys can listen to us when the podcast airs. So also, we have been creating a lot of sessions shows, and if you guys aren't familiar with sessions are, well, a lot of times they're miniature shows that we do on Saturdays each week and everything going in. Sometimes, most of the time, they coincide with what is going on with the week earlier. Sometimes they are, if we didn't finish all the notes, if we didn't finish everything, then sometimes we finish up the show on Saturday, and sometimes we just come up with topics that are different and all sorts of good stuff. But please check out sessions as well, because those are always add-ons and everything. So, all right, guys, don't forget we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, and LinkedIn. Caleb is on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch right now doing live chats. So if you have any questions, chat us up there, and he'll relay the questions. And as always, we will answer them live on the show. Also, don't forget the replays are on iHeartRadio, Spotify, the website, iTunes, Google, and Stitcher. Yes, and hopefully soon Amazon Podcast. So I am all excited because you know why I'm all excited? Well, it's simple because we have a lot of information today. We are doing part 2 of the series of emotions, and I gotta say that I am really, really excited to do this because today's show is really going to help you develop a sense of self. We take all these emotions, we take all these ideas of emotions, and we take our lives. And what's sad is in school we're taught mathematics, in school we're taught science, psychology, we're taught history, we're taught all these subjects except for how to deal with our experiences in life. And for so many of us, we have a hard time with that. We have such a hard time with these things we call emotions, whether we're angry, whether we're happy, whether we're in sadness and grief, or whether we're pensive and worried all the time, or who knows. But our emotions dictate our lives because we are emotional beings. We are very sentient beings that are here to feel, here to experience, and here to understand the world around us through our experiences, through our feelings. And for most of us, last week we talked about anger and fear, and we talked about how anger and fear dictates our lives, and how that when we become angry, when we become fearful, that our perception changes of the world. It changes the way we see things. It affects our relationships, our jobs. It affects everything around us, how we interact with people, because it changes the information. And what ends up happening a lot of times when we become angry and fear, I got a little gnat flying around me right now, it's because the information is misunderstood. It is not understood. It is not understood correctly. And so, what does that mean? As I said last week, so the information is not understood or misunderstood by the way we're perceiving it, and a lot of times that translates to us being fearful, to us being angry, and we have to understand the information. We have to learn to process the information. We have to learn to open our minds and consciousness to this information in order for us to not become angry or fearful. So as a recap, as I always say, emotions are not real. And I know a few of you have written to me over this past week on Facebook and said, well, Miss Raina, I have a hard time with that because I'm angry or I'm happy and I'm sad and I worry, and those are emotions and those are real. And I say, no, I understand that. It was a hard concept for me to get for many lifetimes as well. But that is because you take ownership of these emotions and you view them as a real experience. But really, as I said, emotions are nothing more than the way we perceive information. So the way we're processing information is how we dictate what we are, how we're going to react to it. And so what we call emotions is usually based on how we're going to, and we're going to get into chemicals and neurotransmitters and all sorts of stuff, because I got a little geeky. I have that geeky side in me. And but our emotions are nothing more than frequencies on an energetic level. And so it's really looking at it. If you're really looking and you're saying, well, emotions are real, well, it's really just saying, well, what vibration of frequency are you at? Where am I being raised to, or where am I being lowered to, is where the vibration, and where the vibration is, and that's where we're translating what we call into emotions. And so again, it's information being processed through our body, and then our brain tries to process it in a logical way, and this is what we come up with emotions. And why anger and fear is so important, as we recapped, was because it teaches us to understand who we are. We cannot understand who we are unless we become angry, unless we become fearful, unless we worry, unless we have these things called emotions. So these vibrational frequencies that we call emotions are really kind of dictating our lives, but they're meant to tell us who we are, how we experience it, and they're meant to show us how to grow, how to gain perspective through everything. But we become addicted, we become attached to these emotions, and we're going to get into that a lot later into the show about how emotions are really addictions to a lot of experiences we have and how we're addicted to that. But they really help us learn to love and learn to find out who we are once we process through all these things that we call emotions. And hopefully, after we've gone through a chaotic experience, hopefully after we've gone through something maybe troublesome or something painful, that we learn to absorb the information, translate the information, and use it to grow so that we can come into this what we call happiness. And that's the first emotion that we're going to talk about today, because we are going to talk about happiness, we are going to talk about grief and sadness, and then we're going to talk about kind of how they tie into each other. And for many of us, we're on this trip of trying to find happiness. And I know so many of my students have come into my place and have said, Miss Raina, I'm sad, I'm tired of being sad, I'm tired of being angry, I'm tired of worrying, I just want to be happy. and yes, we do. We want to be happy because the brain and the body love to be happy. We love that. And it is an amazing thing to be happy, or what we call happy, because that means we're at a higher vibrational frequency. And if you guys don't remember the frequencies, and that, go back a couple weeks ago and look at or rewatch the frequency show. I think we had 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. My brain. But yes, we do want to be happy, and we're always chasing this idea of happiness. So my first thing that I'm going to ask you, and I really want you to understand this, is, what is happiness? What is it? What is it to you? What is it? If you're chasing this idea of happiness, what is it? How would we know if we get it? And why? And my next question to you is, if you're going to try to define happiness, then why is this so important to you? Why is happiness the primo, the king or queen of emotions? Why are we all looking forward to this idea of happiness, and we shun anger, we shun fear, we shun worriness, we shun grief, we shun sadness? And it kind of reminds me, if you guys ever seen the movie Inside Out by Disney's Pixar, I absolutely love that movie, because that movie is such a perfect example of what we're doing with our emotions, and how Joy, the character in Joy, is whose happiness always wants to keep everything happy. She doesn't want anything sad, anybody angry, and she's always trying to control everything. And I find it so symbolic of the way we run our lives, because that's what we're trying to do. We ignore sadness, we ignore grief, we ignore anger and fear, and we ignore worry, because we think that they're bad, they're meant to hurt us. But they're not meant to hurt us, because they give us perspective. Happiness is a consequence of perspective. And a lot of times we don't get that, because we're always chasing this idea. We always hear, evolution. We always hear enlightenment. We always hear, be happy, be in your bliss, follow your bliss. But none of us know how to do that, because why? We're working 9-to-5 jobs. We're working with people we don't enjoy. We're overworking ourselves. We're allowing people to take advantage of us. We're dating toxic people. We have toxic friends. We allow people to use us. And the list goes on, doesn't it? And that's why it's really important to us, right? Because just talking about it really gets us into a sense of tiresome. Really, I could feel my energy, my breath start to drain when I start thinking of all these chaotic situations that go through our minds that we experience. But the wonderful thing is that we don't have to do that. We don't have to live those type of lives. We don't have to experience. When chaos comes into our life, or a lesson comes into our life, we don't have to react to it that way. We can be what we call happy all the time. And that doesn't mean that, we're not going to feel sadness, that we're not going to feel anger and fear at times, because that is part of the human experience. And as long as you are incarnated here on earth, you are entitled to all those emotions. And that is one of the biggest things that you have to understand. It is okay to be angry. It is okay to be fearful. It is okay to be happy. It is okay to do all these things. So the state of the definition of happiness is just simple. The state of experiencing pleasant emotions. Well, hey, that sounds simple enough. The state of experiencing pleasant emotions. I think that sounds easy enough for us to do, but it is so much harder than that. So what happens in the brain? Because I want to get a little nerdy, because you guys know I love this. Well, in the brain, we have the hypothalamus. And if we think of the hypothalamus is like a big factory in our brain. And it is a peptide making machine. And it produces peptides. And if you're not familiar with peptides are chemicals. They're small chain amino acid sequences. And what these do is these assemble neurohormones. And these which match our emotional state. So the hypothalamus creates peptides, and then these assemble small chain amino acids. And then what ends up happening is these amino acids create neurohormones that go inside with our emotional state. So what does that mean? That means that when you experience happiness, the hypothalamus triggers these amino acids, these peptides. They create this thing that we call happiness, and it sends these chemical messengers into the body and shoots down throughout the whole body into cells. And our cells have thousands of receptors. And when these cells get bombarded, it's like a lock and a key. The peptide goes into the cell. The cell says, "Oh, look, this is the peptide. Let's feel happy." And all our body lights up and starts dancing, and we feel what we know as happiness. And that goes the same as fear and grief. Any emotion, any emotional reaction that you have, the hypothalamus produces these peptides and sends these peptides, these amino acids into the cells. They break down into and our bodies react to that. And we call and this is what we do. This is why on a physiological level that we think that our emotions are real, and on an energetic level and a spiritual level we know they're just frequencies, and on a physiological level we know that they're hormones. We know that they're peptides, they're amino acids, and what a wonderful thing that is, because the wonderful thing about that is that now that we know that that these things are in our bodies, and these things are frequencies, energetic frequencies, that we can change them and we can start to dictate what happens in our life. So one of the neurotransmitters that makes us feel happy is serotonin. Serotonin is known as the happy hormone. We all love serotonin because serotonin does so much for us. And, a lot of people think that serotonin is produced up here in the head. And a small amount is, but most of it is produced in the intestines and the GI tract. And that is why your digestive health is so important to your body, because if you have bad digestion, if you have intestines, if you have diverticulitis, OSIS, Crohn's disease, anything, your serotonin will be depleted, and it is almost impossible for you to experience happiness. Why? Because serotonin does that. And serotonin also helps us digest. It helps us with blood clotting. It helps us, like I said, regulate mood. And also a big key, if you are having trouble sleeping, is serotonin, and that's usually linked to your digestive health. Have you ever noticed whenever you eat something horrible for you, you have a hard time sleeping? Why? Because it is affecting your digestion, it is affecting your serotonin, and it helps regulate your sleep. And a lot of times people don't understand that. And and when we go back up in the brain and we look at the brain, people don't realize that the prefrontal cortex really does a huge amount for us. Because if I want to keep it simple, we really can say, well, the right side of the prefrontal cortex is where we feel happiness. That lights up when happiness is going through our body. When we go to the left side of the brain, that's where sadness is processed. The left side of the prefrontal cortex, that's where sadness is taking place. And so we have all these things going on in our body, all these wonderful things going on in our body, and serotonin is a huge part of that. Another neurotransmitter is dopamine. What is dopamine? Dopamine is the reward system of our body. It is the accomplishment. When we feel accomplished, and I know some of you athletes out there, some of my softball players too, when we hit a home run or when we win the game, we light up and we're like, yeah, and we're charged, our muscles, our veins are going, and everybody is so excited. And that is dopamine. Whenever you are feeling, whenever you feel a pat on the back, whenever you feel accomplished, you just wrote a dissertation, you just graduated from college, and you walk out that door like, yes, that's my last day, and I'm so excited, and you're just pumped up. That is dopamine. Dopamine makes us feel happy on a reward system level. Sex, eating, good movies, it invigorates our energy. And dopamine also helps with our heart rate, nausea, vomiting, kidneys, all sorts of stuff, our blood vessel, and it just makes us feel alive. And dopamine also, one of the problems with dopamine though is we can become overstimulated. A lot of times, especially in today's world, we become overstimulated with dopamine because we're always watching these movies with big explosions, high def, all this action, and it's overstimulating, and our body's like, whoa, this is so amazing, wow, look at all this stuff. And then when we come out, life seems boring because we have no dopamine left. And we look around and we're like, well, this is boring. I'm at work. I wish my life was like Rambo. I wish my life was like whoever. And we find our lives boring because the dopamine. One of the biggest things that stops dopamine is processed sugars. So I want you guys to remember that processed sugars stops dopamine in its tracks. So if you're constantly eating cupcakes and pop and drinking all this sugary stuff, what's going to end up happening is that's why you need it. Not just because of the sugar going through your body, but because it's giving you that spike of dopamine, that reward system, and then when you're depleted, you're looking for it. And a lot of times these chemical messengers is one of the reasons why we're so addicted to it, because we love to feel good on serotonin. We love to feel good on dopamine. We love to feel good on oxytocin, because oxytocin is what? The love chemical, right? It reinforces attachments. And what I mean by that is pair bonding. And so pair bonding is when a mother hugs, as soon as a mother gives birth, what do they tell you to do? Is to grab your child and to hold it and to hug it and to nurture it right away, because that reinforces attachment, and both the mother and the child is producing oxytocin. This allows everybody to feel loved. When you're in love with somebody, and you're on a date and you're doing things, or you're with a friend and you just look at your friend and say, wow, I'm so glad I have a friend like you. This is affection. And oxytocin also has a big part in how we behave socially. So if we're one of those that it keeps our distance from people, oxytocin, we're probably depleted, because it makes us, when we're full of oxytocin, we want to hug people, we want to be around people, we want to do that. And a lot of times people that overdo oxytocin are the people that always have to touch you, because they're always chasing that high. We're always becoming attached. And so drugs aren't the only things that we're being addicted to. It's our neurotransmitters and our chemical messengers. But we'll be right back after these messages from I Am Evolution.
The human experience is changing, and consciousness is evolving into something higher than any of us could ever imagine. As we transform into more sentient beings, a new world of connected consciousness is taking place. Welcome to I Am Evolution, the movement in human development that transforms the human experience into a deeper consciousness through perspective and duality. Are you ready to be a part of the next stage in human evolution? Call I Am Evolution today to schedule your appointment at 561-318-0006. That's 561-318-0006. Or email us at iamevolution@protonmail.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. If you don't mind the little water spot on my outfit right now, yes, I just spilt water all over me. I was so full of oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine right now from the show that I couldn't even handle my water. And what a wonderful thing that is, isn't it? So, yeah, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, even endorphins. Endorphins are our natural painkillers as well, and a lot of times we don't understand that endorphins are similar to opiates, and it attaches to the opiate receptors in the brain, and that's why a lot of times we enjoy endorphins. It's our natural painkillers. It's similar to the reward system of the dopamine, but a little different, and that happens a lot of times when we're in shock, when we're very excited, when we have different things go on in our lives, even painful times. A lot of times endorphins pump through our body because it helps us move on, it helps us keep our survival, and it helps keeping us move on. So let's get in. So now that we're done with the neurotransmitter and the nerdy side, because that's my favorite side, by the way, I absolutely love that. But now that we're done with that, let's get into the ideas of happiness, because I want to talk on a spiritual level, because that's what this show is about. It is about you. We're trying to find out happiness. And as wonderful as I love all the nerdy stuff of biology and everything, I also love the spirituality. And when my students come in and they walk in, they say, Miss Raina, I want to be happy. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being in fear. I'm tired of always dating the same toxic relationships, whatever the situation is. The first thing I say is, well, if you want happiness, what is it? Do you know what happiness is? And they look at me for a minute and they say, well, yeah, well, it's when you're happy, right? It's when you're happy. It's when you're smiling and you're making good decisions. You're in the right relationships. You're married. You got money. You got these good decisions, nice things. You get all the respect. You're popular. And I sit there and I say, is that what your idea of happiness is? Well, yeah, it's got to be, because that's when I'm happy. Well, I'm happy if I was married or if I was in a good relationship. I was happy if I was making money. When I'm making good decisions, that's when I know I'm doing right. And I look at them and I say, well, then we base our happiness on what we have externally. So if we have all these external values, if we have all this external property, then we think that is happiness. And I say, well, what are you into? And they say, well, what do you mean? What am I into? I say, well, what are you into? And they're like, and they give me a list of interests that they're into. And they say, well, I'm do this, and this makes me happy, and this makes me happy. And I say, well, so your idea of happiness is based on whether or not you're doing something that you enjoy, whether you're making money, whether you have a healthy relationship, or whether you have whatever it is that you're looking for. And they say, well, yeah. And I say, well, you know what? I play softball, and softball makes me happy. But I am not a happy person because I play softball. And then they look at me and they say, well, yeah, that makes sense. And I say, does that make sense to you? And they say, well, yeah, it does. I say, they're like, but softball makes you happy. I was like, no, I am a happy person already. And softball adds to that because softball does bring me joy. I love being on the field. Same with football. Same with helping the homeless or whatever. But I am not a happy person because of those things. So I look at things, and then they look at me and they say, well, you know, Miss Raina, then what am I looking for? What is it that I'm looking for? And I say, well, you're looking for you. Because happiness is all about you. It is about understanding who you are, what you're about, where you're going, and it really puts all the pieces together. And I tell them that happiness has to be happiness has to come from one of two things. It either has to come from you choosing it, or it has to come from you understanding who you are. And usually those two things coincide, because moments of happiness are not real happiness. No matter how many times I just cleaned out my house. I just got rid of over 54 championship shirts from softball over the last 10 years alone. I got rid of over 26 rings from tournaments that I won, plaques, tons of plaques and everything. And none of it did anything for me. None of it, even when I looked at it, it doesn't bring me joy. It brought me memories of things that I once experienced, but it was just metal. It was just wood. It was just cloth. It didn't bring me anything except for moments of happiness. And so I always sit there and say, well, if you're chasing, you have to understand that most people have a choice in this world. They're either chasing happiness or they're choosing happiness. So when I say chasing happiness, that means they're chasing the ideas that they want to be happy. Well, I have to get money. I have to be married. I have to have the cars. I have to have the successful business. I have to do all of these things in order for me to be happy. That is chasing because you want instant gratification. You don't know what true happiness is. So how can you understand happiness other than materialistic gratification? You cannot. And that is one of the hardest things we have to understand, because I grew up in the 80s where, hey, we listened to Madonna and she's the material girl, right? Everything was about and everything is still materialism. And we value ourselves on materialism. I am not successful because if I had 10 million viewers, I am as successful because every day I do what I love, whether one person listens or 10 million people listen. And that is happiness. That is success. That is truth within self. And we can't find happiness because many of us are unable to make choices to be happy. As I said, we're addicted to these things. We're addicted to our fear. We're addicted to our anger. We're addicted to our grief and worry. We love to grieve. We love to worry. We love to be everything but happy. And that's why these moments of monetary or external gratification bring us so much joy, because we don't know how to get happiness on a daily basis. We don't do these things. And our brain loves patterns. If we want to be miserable, if we're one of those people that say, oh, everything always happens to me, well, guess what our brain is going to create on a physiological level? The chemicals that always make us feel like we're nothing. And so we have to learn to retrain ourselves. We have to retrain our frequency. We have to retrain ourselves physiological, on a biological level. We have to retrain everything about us because our bodies change as we do. It's no wonder why people who a lot of times are in great shape feel good about themselves. That's not always the case, because even when I was in really good shape, I had some self-esteem issues that I had to work out, and I was going hard on my working out because I was so insecure in certain areas. Once I'm actually happier now with the weight I am, and one day when I return to be able to work out again, and that when I work out, it'll be for a different reason this time. It won't be chasing something because I'm already at a happy place. And you know what? I don't care what people think. And that's the moment that you look at yourself and you say, wow, you know what? I come to a place where I really love myself. I really understand myself. You know what? Yeah, we're older. We got some more gray hair. We gained some weight. We don't look like we do. We move slower. You know, the people aren't flaunting over us, but that is okay. That is okay to be like that because we consume so much energy in emotions. When we have these ideas that we're chasing, that we have to chase happiness because happiness is not a goal. It's not out there. It's not out someplace. It's here. It's here where happiness resides. Same with fear, anger, worry, all the things we call emotions, they're here already. Nothing is outside of us. And we look at external value like it's everything to us. And that consumes so much energy. And like I said, in our bodies, that consumes all our dopamine, all our serotonin. Our body is depleted because we're spending so much time trying to gain that dopamine. We're addicted to it. We want to chase that dopamine. We want to chase that serotonin, those endorphins. That's why so many of us turn to drugs. That's why so many of us like things that are stimulating and things that make us feel good because in truth we just want to be happy. But the emotions are telling us that we are in our mindset that we are unfulfilled, that we think we want to be happy, we don't understand what happiness is, and we're chasing these ideas. And so we chase these ideas of being cool, being popular, being all these things. But ask yourselves, does that bring you anything? What has that truly brought you? Because if you're hot and good looking, one day your looks will fade, and the same people that flaunt it over you won't give you the time or day. When you're talented at something, one day when your star fades, when your athleticism or your popularity fades, those people won't care about you anymore. And then what are you going to have? And so this chasing of this high, this chasing of everything creates this addiction to our thoughts, to our patterns, to our life. So we have to choose happiness. We have to have a conscious choice of what happiness is. And what does that mean? What does that mean, Miss Raina, that we have to have a conscious choice? Well, I want to be happy, and I say I want to be happy. But no, it's not. It is devotion. Are you devoted to yourself? A lot of times we're not. You will start out really hard, maybe going to the gym for a week or two, and then we stop. We say, "Oh, I'm too busy. I'm tired. Oh, I don't want to do it today. Oh, I lost 5 pounds. I'm good." I'm tired of these toxic relationships. So, okay, you know what? I'm not going to date anymore. I'm choosing me by not dating anymore. Well, that's not devotion. That's rejection. That's pushing things away. And no matter what the situation is from anybody, devotion is sticking with something, sticking with your ideas constantly. It is a 24-hour day, 7 days a week thing. It's who we are. This is Miss Raina, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't put on an act 1 hour a week or whenever I put on the video camera. This is not an act. Everybody who knows me knows this is who I am. 24 hours. Now that doesn't mean that I don't have my moods. That doesn't mean that things don't happen, but I am devoted and when something comes up in my life, I devote myself to fully understanding the experience at hand, because I know if I hold on to this misconception of this experience, then what it's going to turn into is fear, then it's going to turn into anger, and I'm right back in the situation that I am. And that all leads to not accepting self. It leads to a rejection of acceptance. When you reject yourself, when you reject the world or the way things are or the people or the situations, then your emotions become unstable because you start those patterns of fear, of anger, of worry, of grief, of sadness. And so acceptance, that is the hardest thing. And when we get into grief in a little bit, I'm going to tell you the same thing. And I'm telling you, all those who struggle with your emotions, you have to accept what has happened to you. I have been abused. I have had bullies. I've had a lot of situations. I don't ever hardly have many friends. And that was hard for me for many, many years. And I had to learn how to accept it, how to find my situation as pleasant, because it was pleasant. But I based my value on whether people called me. I based my value on how the people around me, friends, treated me, and the abuse that I took as a child. That was my value too. I couldn't accept it. I didn't want to accept it because I thought it was associated with pain. And for many years it was. Every time I pictured something, this association, remember the brain association sends those chemicals. That's what would happen, and I would create this thing, and it would make me feel terrible. But acceptance, I had to accept myself for who I was. I had to accept the world for the way it is. I had to accept all the things around me, the people around me, my experiences, their experience, for the way they are. And until you do that, until you devote your time and accept you for who you are, you will never reach this idea of happiness, because happiness is an external thing. It doesn't exist. No emotion exists. All it is bringing awareness. Awareness makes us feel happy. It is what we call consciousness, enlightenment, and it doesn't exist, but it's a higher vibration that you raise to, and you call that happiness. But when we stagnate and we go down to a lower vibration, we call it anger, we call it fear, we call it grief, because we're not moving. And so how can we tell, Miss Raina, how can we tell if we're chasing or choosing? Simple. If we're chasing, we're always running into the same patterns. Always. If we're always dating the same toxic people, if we're always letting people walk over us, if we're always beating ourselves up, I'm not good enough, this always happens to me, then we're chasing these external values. If we're always going on social media and fighting with one another and trying to outdo each other in politics, my side's right, your side's wrong, you're an idiot. If you're trying to do these things, you're chasing happiness and disastrously. And so you have to learn to choose. Someone who chooses doesn't need to chase. I don't need to chase people. If people want to be my friends, they'll find who I am, they'll realize who I am, and they'll be my friend. If they don't, then hey, that's wonderful, because you know what? That's wonderful too. Go find your friends. Go find your circle. Relationships, hey, I haven't been in a relationship in so long, and people look at me with like 3 heads, and I say, why? I'm happy where I'm at. I love where I'm at. And I don't need a relationship to make me happy, because I chose me. Same with jobs. I love what I do. Whether I'm making $40 a day or it doesn't matter. I love what I do. I do this radio show. I offer free help to a lot of people because I love what I do. That's choosing us. And it's healthy lifestyle decisions. When we're chasing, we're choosing unhealthy relationships. That means we're chasing unhealthy friendships, those toxic people that don't want to love us. We're chasing those unhealthy jobs. We're chasing unhealthy lifestyle patterns, eating. We just don't care. And of course, you have chosen your state of mind. Always remember that where you're at, when you're a child, okay, I can understand things that happen to you are setting you up for the way you need to be in adulthood so that you can learn to grow. But once you're an adult and you can understand conscious choice, then what ends up happening is you choose every single day to be like you are. There is no one to blame but you. And that is part of choosing, taking responsibility for who we are and saying, you know what, if I'm tired of being angry and fearful and sad, then let's change it. Let's start choosing me. Let's start eliminating all the toxins, whether in food, in relationships, people around us, social media. Let's eliminate all the toxins around us so that I can choose me each and every day. And it's a very hard thing to do for a lot of us, because we are always in this idea of chasing. How can we chase when our mental productivity it goes down? The moment we're in chaos, remember, the thought process of our brain shuts down whenever our amygdala triggers, anger, or is triggered by anger, fear, whatever. Once we become emotional, our mental productivity, the way we think, the way we analyze things, our attentiveness goes down. When we remove these things we call emotions, everything rises up. Things don't seem so hard anymore. And we'll get right into this after these messages from I Am Evolution.
The human experience is changing, and consciousness is evolving into something higher than any of us could ever imagine. As we transform into more sentient beings, a new world of connected consciousness is taking place. Welcome to I Am Evolution, the movement in human development that transforms the human experience into a deeper consciousness through perspective and duality. Are you ready to be a part of the next stage in human evolution? Call I Am Evolution today to schedule your appointment at 561-318-0006. That's 561-318-0006. Or email us at iamevolution@protonmail.com.
All right, everybody, we are back, and I didn't spill any water on myself, so I'm going to applaud myself for that. But yes, we are talking about emotions, part 2 series. So if you're just joining us, we are talking all about that. And what I want to get into next is need versus want, because in a few minutes we're going to get into grief, because I have so many notes. I got to skip over things, but I really want to talk about this because this is so important. What is need versus want? What is that? If I asked you, what's the difference between need and want? Do you know the difference? So let's break it down really quickly before we get into grief. Need is desire. It comes from desire. It comes from our ego. We have to have it. If I need something, I want it. I need that iPhone. I need to date that person. I need to be that person. You could still say, "Oh, I want that iPhone," but it's on a much different level. It's much stronger. It's a desire. It's from the ego. It comes from our survival instincts. It's basic. We view objects and people and ideas as if we're going to die without it. That is need. It comes from a very selfish intention of who we are. It's often linked to fear and grief. Because if we lose something, if we're afraid to lose something, or if we've lost something and we're afraid to be without something, then we go into this need. Just like this, when we had this start of this pandemic, when everybody ran out and grabbed all the toilet paper up. Well, they needed toilet paper because they thought they were going to be without. Oh my God, we're going into a huge pandemic. The world's going to fall apart. We need toilet paper because how else are we going to clean ourselves? And if this pandemic is out, so it went into a primal need. When hurricanes happen here in Florida, everybody fights over gas because they need it. Because what if we become without? Want comes from understanding. Well, hey, I'm good inside. I'm together inside. So you know what? Yes, I want to do this. I want to, I want to be able to do this. I want to have this. And it comes from an understanding without desire. It comes from a place of happiness. It comes from a place of peace within self. When we want something, when we want something, what ends up happening is we don't have to create a need for it. Remember, the need is always going to be that way. It's always going to be very selfish. We only need the basic essentials. We only need to eat. We only need air, maybe a roof over our head now, and an emotional fulfillment, if that. But that's all we really need. You don't need an iPhone. You don't need a car. You don't need half the stuff we do. But our society has created this idea of need. So what I'm going to do, because we got 15 minutes left, I have all this other stuff, but I want to talk about grief for a little bit, because grief is really what ends up happening to us when we lose something. And a lot of times a lot of students have come to me and people write to me and say, Miss Raina, I have such a hard time getting over grief. Grief is so hard to get over, and it is, because it's a natural response to loss. The way when we lose something, we grieve and we experience grief because it is a loss, because it is the emotional side of our mind. We are losing an attachment to an idea, a person, a place, a thing. And so when we have this idea that this thing or this idea or this person is supposed to be in our lives forever, or we have an idea that things are supposed to be a certain way because because we were told that through life, that when we get married we're supposed to be together forever, the white picket fence. When I get this job, everything's working well. I was told I'm a great employee, I'm supposed to work forever here. When we start creating attachments to people, places, and things and ideas, we experience grief. So again, what happens in the brain? Well, the amygdala gets activated and the grieving process starts. And when the amygdala gets processed, remember, our prefrontal cortex shuts down. We no longer have rational thought. We no longer have rational thinking. And we go into this irrational state of mind because loss is hard for us. And a lot of people ask me, they always say, well, Miss Raina, it is so hard because we become addicted to these ideas. We become attached. Remember, emotions and addictions are go hand in hand. When we experience unexpected loss, especially in a radical way, our mind tries to have logical rationality to it, because we're taught that, hey, when we get old, when we're born, we're supposed to live through our whole lives till our 80s and 90s and die peacefully. That doesn't happen. When we become parents, children aren't supposed to die on us. Well, that doesn't happen. Accidents happen. Disease happens. And we have a hard time understanding. Grief happens when we are unable to accept logic. So I want you to remember that. Grief happens when we are unable to accept logic. And what does that mean? Well, logic to us. So what is it? What did we grow up? What did our attachments grow up to? What did we grow up to believe? And when something suddenly happens, when someone passes away or something changes unexpectedly, our brain tries to analyze it, tries to make sense, and tries to change the situation because it is hard for us to deal with. And oftentimes, sometimes maybe we do something to somebody else and we really hurt somebody and we never see them again, or because of it our marriage falls apart and we feel ashamed. And because we feel ashamed of a situation, we grieve. We have a grieving process because being ashamed of something also turns into grief. So we have to understand that the reality of situations we cannot become attached to. Grief has to be able to be processed. When we process grief is meant to allow us to process the information that we are receiving. And it's supposed to allow us to move on past the things that we lose. So if we have a partner, a wife, a husband, a child that has passed, and me doing mediumship for so many years, one of the hardest things for me to do was have parents come in and say, I want to hear from my child, because they expect their child to be sitting next with you and like you're going to give them back to them, and it never is like that. And no matter how many times I connected to them, you would see some healing going on, but then they would go through a period of feeling worse because, wow, I was able to connect to my child, but they're not there. And because this idea took place in their head that, I'm having this child, I'm supposed to raise it, I'm supposed to have it grow, then they're supposed to take care of me. And so these ideas of grief are often wrapped around these ideas that are attached. And so our perception of ownership has to change. And why I say perception of ownership, because the more we perceive ownership on an idea, a person, a place, or a thing, the harder it is when we lose it. We have to understand that we don't own anybody. Our parents are not really to us. Our brothers, our sisters aren't really our brothers and sisters. We are all taking roles. Every one of us has a role, like in a movie, that we're playing out. We're acting out this life. Like right now, I am acting out the life of Miss Raina. And that is why at one time I called my business The Life of Miss Raina, because this is just a persona that I'm acting. I cannot become attached to this. I can't become attached to all of this, my education, my show and stuff, because one day it may not be here. And when that day happens, I will have to learn to let go of it the way I need to, because it was done in the way it needed to be for the time it needed to be here. And that is what grief teaches us. Grief is meant to show us to appreciate the time that we have and appreciate the things that we do have when we have them. Because most of us don't. We buy something. I have this iPhone, and every couple of years they make me buy a new one because they start sending programs out to mess it up. So am I supposed to get attached to this iPhone and say, oh, well, I just bought this iPhone and now, no. This iPhone may break. This iPhone will break one day. It will go out of order. And when that time happens, I will move on to the next phone. When my car breaks down, I will move on. When my friends, I have met so many wonderful people throughout my life, traveling all over this country. Some I've known for just minutes in a club or in a play or at a museum, and we had a great time, some of the best experiences ever, and I never saw them again. And some I've met for a year, some I met for 2 years, some I've known for 5 years, but the idea of attachment wasn't there. I've always appreciated people and places for what they were in those moments. And if you're grieving, try to first accept the loss. Accept whatever it is, whether it's a person, place, or thing. You have to accept the loss. It is gone from your life. And as sad as it is, as hard it is, you have to learn to process the loss and accept that it's no longer going to be in your life. And start to learn to appreciate the ideas that when it was in your life. Because, hey, when it was in your life, maybe it was great and wonderful. And your life can be that way too. Life doesn't have to be pain and suffering. Life can be fun. Life can be enjoyable, Glenn. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be these things. Change is hard. Every 10 years, I go through a massive change. Every decade hits on. I can literally say from 10 to 19, my life was one way. From 20 to 29, my life was one. And every decade, even now, the past 2 years ago, I went through a major life change of friends, ideas, hanging out, everything. Everything changed for me. And as sad as it was to let go of certain people, I knew that I had to move forward, or I had to move into a direction that was into my interest, where I was going now. Because at one time, yes, those were my interests, those were my friends, those were my ideas, but now they're not. And what a wonderful thing that is, because that gives me choice. That gives me the idea of choice, so that I can do whatever I want. I can go out. If I want to create happiness, creating happiness is living in the moment, is living who you are, and living in choice. Choice to go here and do this, choice to go there, choice to travel, choice to jump out of an airplane, or whatever floats your boat. But when you're stuck in grief, you don't do anything, because life has no meaning for you. You think that life has died with you, and life hasn't died with you, because you're still here. You're still here living. And that is the hardest concept to translate, because we have to let go of what we lost. We have to accept it. We have to learn to appreciate what we had. We have to learn to appreciate what we have, and we have to focus on right here, right now. Because like I said, tomorrow, there's no guarantee. Tomorrow may not happen for me. It may not happen for you. It may not happen for your friends, whatever. We never know what's going to happen. And that's the one thing about our emotions. That's the one thing that we're supposed to get out of grief, is to understand, to appreciate the now, to understand, to appreciate what we have when we have it. If you ignore grief, it doesn't do anything but pile up. Grief can turn into anger. Grief can turn into depression. I know. I've lost people when I was young, and I used to hold on to those ideas, those people. I've lost a lot when I was young. to a lot of different things. I had to move away from, I gave up a business. I gave up a lot of things in Chicago because I wanted to go out and live my life. And as hard as that was, moving away from my mom and my friends and my family and my hometown, I knew that I had to move on and to do other things. And so I grieved. Even now, I found some CDs. I found some CDs from a few years ago, or not from a few years ago, from many years ago, from 2000s, from 1999, back from Chicago. And I started playing them, and I reminisced it, and I felt nostalgic because I was like, wow. I was like, I totally forgot about this music, and it started making me remember friends and things that I did and memories. And I wasn't sad. I was nostalgic because it brought back such great times. I love where I'm at. Hey, I'm a little older. I'm a little slower. I got a lot more gray hair. Well, right now it's purple, but I got a lot more gray hair. And, those times are fun, but I wouldn't trade it because those times are over. And that's what I'm talking about. I don't grieve anymore because I allowed myself to grieve when I needed to. When I moved out from Chicago and I started traveling, of course I missed people. I allowed myself to do it. I allowed myself to go through the 5 stages. And a lot of times people have a hard time with that, with the 5 stages of grief. They have a hard time they go into the denial phase, and a lot of people stay there because, again, that's your mind trying to change the situation that happens. And then when you try to change any situation, what's the next stage? They say, of course, anger. Why? Because you're angry that it happens because you don't accept it. And then because you don't accept it, you want to bargain. How many of us have partied too much? We've gotten really sick and we've begged, we've bargained. We'll never do it again if it stops. And of course, we're going to do it again, but we're bargaining because whenever we're in distress, whenever we're in any type of distress, whether it's silliness like that or something way more serious, we want to change it. We want that person back. We want to take away that situation. We want to change all these ideas. And then depression comes in because we realize we haven't accepted it. And so depression comes in because now we realize we can't change it. There's nothing to do. And the blame game starts. Well, I should have done this, or they did this to me and they did that to me, or I shouldn't have done this, and how dumb was I for doing this? And then what's the last stage that finally starts to happen is acceptance. You must accept the situations for what they are. So, all right, guys, I have so much more information, and as always, we never get through to it, but that is okay because I'd always rather have too much than not enough. But this is why we have our session shows on Saturdays that we upload after we do them, because we go into more in depth, or we cover your questions, we cover all these different things that we have for our audience and everything. So if you still have questions, please email us at transcendentaltransformations@gmail.com. And yeah, guys, I hope you guys loved tonight's show. Next week we have part 3, which is worry and pensiveness, and we're gonna have, and I can't wait for that show. So don't forget to follow us on our Facebook at facebook.com/Transcendental Transformation. Our YouTube is Transcendental Transformation Radio Show. Visit our website soulandspiritguide.com and sign up for our newsletter to get VIP access, especially when we have guests and stuff on our show. And always remember to believe in yourself, and it's not our abilities or our talents that make us who we are, but it is our choices. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.